We're now joined by conflict resolution expert and risk Recon director, Dr. Kingsley Makhubela. Dr. Makhubela, thank you so much for your time right here on the show. Let's then start with some of those comments that were made by the former Israeli head of government, speaking there to my colleague Sophie Mokoena, saying that he expects Israel to retaliate. But then he also says that the country will also listen to some of its allies. Of course, we know that those allies, including the US, are asking for restraint. I mean, how will Israel then balance this?
Good afternoon, Unati. If you listen to right at the end of Ehud Barak's statement, he spoke about strategic patience. Iran has for years, actually is borrowing this term from the Iranians. Iran has for years exercised what it calls strategic patience. And this strategic patience simply means that they would not directly enter into conflict with Israel. Now they've declared that the strategic patience has come to an end, meaning that they are open for a conflict, a direct conflict with Israel. On the other hand, Israel has maintained two fundamental approaches. They call these approaches that Iran is irrational and suicidal. And this framing has been used to court the Americans in supporting the Israelis in their conflict with the Iranians. You would have seen during the Security Council debate early this morning, the argument that Iran was trying to make, that they acted in self-defense and they regard this as self-defense. Meanwhile, the Israelis have been at pains to try to court support of other countries in the Middle East. And they've used a very dangerous approach in my own view. They are talking about Iran that is trying to come up with its Shiite hegemony. Now, the use of Shiite hegemony came more than twice during the statement of the Israeli ambassador, but that is meant to create a wedge between the Shiite and the Sunnis, and the Sunnis being really predominantly the Saudis, to try to drive a wedge. And I think that's a very wrong precedent that they are trying to set to really cultivate the Sunni-Shia divide to perpetuate their own interests in this conflict.
I mean, just talking about precedent, notwithstanding, of course, that the Israeli War Cabinet is meeting this afternoon again, just to take it a little bit back, shortly after Israel retaliated on Hamas after that 7 October attack by Hamas, world leaders warned of a possible spillover into the region. Now that we are here, I mean, just talk to us about the implications this will then have, geopolitically especially.
Well, everyone is at pain, from the Secretary General to a lot of heads of state, to Xi Jinping, Putin, President Biden. They're speaking about de-escalating the tension. And they're appealing to Netanyahu not to retaliate, because Iran has made it quite clear that should Israel retaliate on this attack, they would come up ferociously against the Israelis. So everyone is trying to calm the situation because they understand the implication of this conflict. This conflict may have disastrous consequences, as it is already. It's having serious consequences on the logistics and the fuel prices around the world. So this is not good for the stability of the global economy that is running at a debt of more than $307 trillion. So they are trying to manage this issue because everyone would be a loser in the end. And that's why you're seeing this appeal for restraint. And so will Israel hit the call for restraint is something that we need to see, because previously Israel has even defied the United States. Israel recently received what they call the cluster, the bomb that are meant to destroy the bunkers bombs, to try to hit targets. Now, Israel is quite buoyant that they want to use this kind of weapons against Iran. Will they listen? We are yet to see. The fact that the War Cabinet has been meeting since last night and they're continuing the meeting today, it tells you there's no agreement. But the worry, Unati, is the far right within the government, that it's really so dominant and very influential.
Dr. Makhubela, just, going on your earlier point about, just your concerns with Israel's use of Shiite hegemony. I mean, how significant then is Jordan's, position in all of this? Of course, we know that Jordan's foreign minister, saying that the Amman does not want a spillover conflict in the Middle East. Perhaps explain, the significance of Jordan's position here.
The Jordanians, Unati, are a host to a large number of Palestinian refugees. The impact of the conflict in Palestine severely affects Jordan. And that's why Jordan has been at pain, really, to try to ease the humanitarian situation in Gaza and in Palestine generally. So they are directly impacted by this. But Jordan has also launched its anti-missile system to try to intercept missiles that were violating the Jordanians' airspace. And that's the argument. And they've made it quite clear that they did not come up in defense of Israel. They were just trying to manage the fact that there was a violation of their airspace. But the Jordanians have had a good relationship with Israel and the Americans. And the Jordanians have taken a very kind of lukewarm position towards all this rhetoric that you're seeing around the Middle East, people vying for direct conflict with Israel and so on. Jordan has played a very neutral role, sometimes very timid, and it has come under criticism by some Islamic countries in that part of the world. But the use of the Shiite hegemony, because remember, Nati, the Shiite it's in Iran, and the Sunnis are predominantly, and by and large, are found in Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia has had a frosty relationship with Israel until lately, where there's been a rapprochement. So for them to try to drive a wedge between the two countries, the Israelis have opted to use this Shiite-Sunni divide. Hopefully they hope it would work for them, but I don't think it would work, because the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia, it's really on firm ground.
And just you mentioning Iran and Saudi Arabia, I want us to bring it closer to home, because, as you would imagine, there is so much concern, even right here in South Africa. South Africa has been very vocal in this matter, even taking it up to the ICJ, as you earlier said. I'm wondering then, what does this mean, for this country, especially when we consider, the role that we play with Iran being a BRICS member. You mentioned Saudi Arabia also, by extension, a BRICS member, and the country's solidarity with Palestine. How is this all fitting in?
The solidarity with the Palestinian people cuts across the Shiite-Sunni divide. There's unanimous support among the Arab countries for the Palestinian cause, no doubt about that. But with respect to the relationship that has been forged between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and both of them be members of the BRICS families, there's an expectation that there will be a role that will be played by both Russia and China in trying to mitigate this, because China played a fundamental role in bringing the two countries together, and China would not like to see the deterioration of the relations that will lead to some level of conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran. So they are going to do whatever it takes to try to bring some level of peace there. So that, I don't think it would sell for the Israelis. The Israelis have annoyed everyone in terms of the brutality that we've seen in Gaza, the killing of children. So they're not going to get a lot of sympathy from the Arab world. I don't think they would get that. There may be people who are concerned about Iran's action, but it's unprecedented. It's the first time that Iran carry out attacks directly on the Israeli soil. Israel has carried out attacks before. They've carried out, 3 months ago, they carried out an attack at Damascus airport. And there was no condemnation of Israeli behavior. So this double standard, which was mainly raised at the Security Council yesterday, is what it's really affecting the credibility of the West, particularly the Americans, who are seen as a doyen of democracy around the world. Their reputation is really affected. Israel is dragging them along.